Oh hey look, it's Titanfall. Titanfall 2 is one of those games that many people have heard of, but most aren't truly familiar with firsthand. If you know anything about Titanfall 2, it's probably one of these three things. It's fast. It's high octane. And it has big-ass robots. Titanfall 2 is simply awesome. There's no other way to put it. There's a reason this game, despite being effectively shelved by its developers, has a dedicated fan base that still go on and on about how great it is. And Titanfall simply isn't Titanfall without its Titans. That's why they're in the name. They complete the game. Titans might seem on the surface like they're just some big set-piece thing to grab your attention, and yeah, kind of, but also, no. Titans are here for genuinely well-thought-out reasons which significantly improve the gameplay. Firstly, they punish passive, campy styles of play because if you sit by a window all game, a giant mech will eventually come over and blow the top half of your body across the room. Which is great for everybody else because while camping is a perfectly valid way to play the game, it's not particularly fun. Titans also reward players for getting kills, promoting an active playstyle, which is mildly important for a game where you fly around and shoot people, and they exist as an evolution of killstreaks from Call of Duty. This might sound like a tangent for an unrelated series, but Titanfall was developed by people who left Call of Duty to go make Titanfall. It's basically a spiritual successor. If you didn't play Call of Duty extensively, then you might not know how killstreaks work, but they're really simple. In that entire series, pretty much, if you get a few kills without dying, then you'll be rewarded with your choice of some bullshit that kills 4 more people for almost totally free. Or if you get like 10 kill credits, you can cash them all in for a drink from the fountain whose waters make it so you never have to pee again. These kill streaks, especially after Modern Warfare 2, got kinda crazy. And very consistently resulted in having players who were already doing very well getting an extra few kills on top of their existing success for hitting a button, with many of these kill streaks being not particularly fun to play against either, such as UAV, Harrier, and very notoriously Dogs in both World at War and Black Ops 2, which respectively were map hacks for your entire team, and by the way, this is up all the time. A giant plane that hovers around the map and shoots down any enemies that it sees, including other enemy killstreaks, and 7 agents of Ball that knew exactly where you were and pursued you relentlessly until you died. To summarize, you would get 3 or 5 or 7 or whatever number of kills without dying, then you hit a button and got some kind of an assist that would go on to kill a few more people for you, or at least make it really easy to kill them yourself, because what was once a 1v1 is now a 1vu and a plane. Something that I think is funny personally is that hero shooters have, rightfully, might I add, gotten a lot of shit for their ultimates. Some of these being buttons that just like killed 5 people if you had half of a brain. But Call of Duty was out here doing much more evil shit for years before the hero shooter genre ever materialized. And as far as I can tell, never got quite the same level of layman criticism, which it should have gotten, because while killstreaks were extremely fun in a very selfish, I like seeing my name in the kill feed sort of sense, they weren't really that fun to do or to deal with in many cases. Titans, on the other hand, are a totally different beast. Not only are they far more fun to actually play as opposed to being an automated bot which you drop in through a button, which is kind of funny because they thematically are literally a bot that you drop in through a button. In gameplay though, there's something you actively, for lack of a better term, pilot. Functioning is basically a hidden hero shooter you play after doing some work as a pilot. Just for completeness' sake, because I know someone's gonna tell me about it in the comments, you can allow your Titan to walk around on its own, but auto Titans are almost completely dysfunctional and defenseless, and if you're using them, you're basically just handing your opponent's free killstreak meter. If after this video you're interested in playing Titanfall 2 and you never have before, whatever you do, just pilot your Titan, please. Because a good Titan can do serious damage, while also being much more fun to fight against for their victims because of how well balanced the Titan versus pilot dynamic can be. A smart pilot can outfox a Titan, escaping it or even causing significant damage to it, as opposed to killstreaks from COD for which you had very little counterplay in many cases. They're a true expression of skill for both players. Most of the time. Especially so in Titanfall 2, where they underwent some restructuring. In Titanfall 1, Titans were basically just larger versions of pilots, for lack of a better description. You had 3 chassis to choose from, which represented different levels of mobility and health. Ogre was slow and healthy, Strider was fast and flimsy, Atlas was in the middle. There was also a secret 4th Titan you got for beating the campaign on the highest difficulty that was a hyper-reflective cube that sat there and criticized everything you did and said, but nobody played that because it was kind of depressing. Each of these Titans could select from a series of loadouts that they could equip. Some loadouts were better on certain Titans, but everybody could choose whichever one they wanted. Titanfall 2 changed things around by pulling what you might call a TF2. Not this TF2, the other TF2, the one... Okay, cut that shit out. Where they took this arsenal of weapons and chopped them up and locked them away from each other so that you could build an entire character out of them. It might seem like I'm just including TF2 to keep my TF2 audience engaged in my TF2 but not TF2 video, but this is genuinely what TF1 did in 1996. As most of you probably know, Team Fortress started off life as a Quake mod, and the devs took the weapons of Quake and divvied them around so that they could make entire characters from them as a way of trying to improve Quake's gameplay for more than 4 people. In case you're wondering, Quake with like 6 or 8 people is basically just getting third-partied for 20 minutes. This worked out for both games. Titanfall 2 used this to improve its Titans, and Team Fortress did this to help fuel Valve's giant evil robot that runs off of money and tears. This method of design lets you construct fun, interesting characters by giving them a set of prescribed weaknesses and strengths in a very simple and direct way. You want the rocket launcher? Cool, but you gotta play Soldier alongside it, and the same goes for Titans. You want the Predator cannon? Cool, but you gotta play Legion to get it, and you gotta deal with all the problems that Legion has, and all the things Legion doesn't have. Originally, the game launched with 6 Titans like this: Ion, Northstar, Tone, Legion, Douchebag, and Scorch, each of them being constructed around weapons that were either returning from Titanfall 1, like Tone's 20mm cannon, or were built for the single-player campaign. And these original 6, as a result, were overall very distinct and quite well balanced. Each one had its place in the ecosystem. Some were good at long range, some in melee, some in tight quarters, some preferred open spaces, and each Titan had 1 or 2 good and bad matchups as well. Nobody was perfect or invincible and could be taken down by smart adaptations from your opponents. For example, Ronin, the Samurai Titan, is a monster at close range for all enemies, but has very little health and almost no functional defenses at a distance, compared to the opposite end of the spectrum, which was Northstar, the Sniper Titan. Northstar could body threats before they ever closed the gap, but had to charge its weapons and was weak to rushdown. Not to mention the slow fire rates of its primary didn't help its chances against pilots. It wasn't perfect, Ronin was easily the strongest, and Scorch was very confidently the weakest, or at least the most situational, but things weren't really that bad, and a good Scorch, just for example, could levy his character into monstrous anti-Titan damage for his team. It was fun, it was exciting, you had to think and be adaptive and stay on your toes to keep your Titan alive. And most importantly, while the game wasn't even, it was fair. That might sound weird because aren't even and fair the same thing? But not exactly. Titans weren't even, they had uniqueness, but they all abided by the same rules. Their health and survivability were limited, they were always on a timer, they weren't perfectly versatile, they usually got 1 ultimate per life, maybe 2 if you were really unpunished, and they couldn't heal outside of small amounts and in rare situations. All of the Titans were different, but they were all bound by this foundation, and it was great as a result. But for some reason, Respawn Entertainment got the funny idea to switch things up, to create a 7th Titan, one that would disrupt this balance forever, and become the arguable king of all of Titandom. If this concept wasn't funny enough to them, they also decided to give it a very clever name, because much like royalty, the rules for Monarch just weren't the same. You might be worried that this video is playing secret demonic frequencies that only the most religiously attuned viewers can hear, but I wouldn't worry about that, because Monarch is the nearly undisputed champ of this game. There is a school of thought that says that Ronin is better. Ronin is capable of some pretty crazy maneuverability and very explosive damage, especially once it has ultimate. But for my money, I think Monarch is just more consistent. Monarch isn't super unreasonably overpowered or anything, it's just doing stuff that Titans really shouldn't be doing. It's useful in all situations, it loses no matchups, it's a powerhouse against both Titans and pilots, it gets to ult 2 or 3 or more times per life, and it much more frequently both temporarily and permanently heals itself. It's designed to stick on the battlefield where other Titans were more or less disposable, intended to be used and then ejected from. Most unfortunately for my aura, however, Monarch is my favorite Titan to play in the game, which is bad because Monarch has one of the worst playstyles a Titan can have. Like I just said, Titans in Titanfall were intentionally designed to be a thing you used for as long as you reasonably could, and then separated yourself from once the heat got too high. Damage against Titans was almost always permanent. They were instead incentivized to mitigate damage using their abilities rather than to heal it back. This is what makes Titans so much fun to deal with compared to other games. In Titanfall, no matter how much you're getting fucked up, as long as you're landing damage on a Titan, it's likely permanent. This isn't like Battlefield, for instance, where you can drive your tank up to the front lines, kill a few people, and if the enemy starts to try and chew through your 8,000 health, that only some weapons can do anything about, you can run away and heal it all back up and do it again. Not in this game. If somebody landed a Firestar on your Titan, that's pretty much it. The only times you got to heal were after a friendly pilot rodeoed an enemy Titan, which involves them sitting on top of it and going through a long-winded animation to grab a battery from that Titan, a battery basically being a small Titan health pack, which they could then give to you or your allies for a small heal and some ultimate charge. This doesn't happen often because Titans have inbuilt anti-rodeo defenses in the form of electric smoke that forces pilots to disengage or die, and some Titans have additional ways to stop rodeos, like Northstar's proximity rockets. Not to mention, of course, other enemies can just shoot you off during the attempt. Even if you did get the battery, you're then left in a cat and mouse chase with the still living Titan you just stole from, that you are now 5 feet away from, who can just as easily hunt you down to get their battery back, if not just shoot you the instant you leave. Escaping with a battery and giving it to an ally, therefore, was no guaranteed feat. Not to mention that if a friendly pilot did this, they could just save the battery for themselves. You should expect to go many Titan lifetimes without ever getting to see the majesty of the Archon of the Forest, and without seeing a battery. This incentivizes Titans to play aggressively and productively. You're getting very little done by trying to sheepishly avoid conflict because you'll get no ultimate charge. Not to mention, you'll be swarmed by pilots that have an easier time of damaging you since you're sticking to one spot, trying to camp as a giant target. Instead, it's better to go out and earn your powerful ultimates by killing pilots, NPCs, and damaging enemy Titans, especially since you're not capable of retreating and being patched back up anyway. This was the case for all of the original Titans. This is one of the major things that tied everybody together and made it so that they were all distinctively and uniquely playing the same game. Whether you were a Ronin, a Tone, a Legion, or otherwise, you were trying to engage in the front lines and duke it out. Monarch does still have to give a shit about this. It just has to give less of a shit than everybody else. Monarch is not only the only Titan in the game which can give itself temporary health almost at will, but it's intentionally designed to heal over the course of the game more than other Titans. For one, Monarch can steal batteries without rodeoing, which is huge because it means you can steal a battery without exiting your Titan. Anytime a Monarch gets a finisher on another Titan, it steals their battery. Finishers happen when a Titan melees another Titan who's had their health reduced to 0, after which you enter the doomed state and take increased damage on a shorter health bar. The Doom state exists to try and give the pilot an opportunity to eject or to squeeze out a little bit more damage before ejecting. Getting hit with a finisher stops your possibility for escape and guarantees the kill, which is bad, but getting hit with a finisher is usually not a significantly big deal. The enemy does get some ultimate charge and they refill their shields, which is pretty rough, but that's about it. Against a Monarch, however, it's significantly worse because they refill their shield, heal, and get ultimate charge all at once. It's not much health, but every drop counts, and these resources do more for Monarch because Monarch isn't disposable. Unlike other Titans, whose ultimates are swingy, powerful abilities that can cause havoc among the enemy. For example, Ion's powerful laser that shreds any target it can keep LOS on. Monarch's ultimate causes it to refill its shields and upgrade. These upgrades are chosen by the player's loadout and can be extraordinarily strong, especially the third and final upgrade. Basically, Monarch isn't here to get some effective, critical, and pivotal attack and then to bail. It's here to squat on the battlefield and slowly accrue power until it's an unstoppable killing machine all of the time. And that's why healing, especially since it doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket or any co-pays, is crazy for Monarch. Healing for a Titan like Legion is just an opportunity to squeeze in a few more kills, some more Titan damage, a little bit more scoring, really. Healing for Monarch is more opportunities to build ultimates and level up, which causes it to heal again and continue to get stronger. This is why finishers are so good for it. You finish off a Titan, heal your shields, heal your real HP, and then get ultimate charge, which eventually lets you heal your shields again. Every drop of health for Monarch isn't just healing, it's healing that leads to more healing later down the line. And Monarch doesn't even have to really rely on enemies dying and dropping batteries to do this. Its defensive ability damages Titans, stuns both Titans and pilots, which blurs your vision and reduces your sensitivity, and refills some of its own shield. This lets Monarch give itself a small health boost so that it can build even more ultimate, which again refills its shields and causes it to continue to grow more powerful. Monarch's shield bar is like a vampire, and no matter how many times you kill it, it just keeps coming back. Other Titans have to rely on their defensive abilities to prevent damage from occurring at all, whereas Monarch can just shrug that damage back off over and over and over again. Tone, for instance, has a really good defensive tool, maybe like the third best or so in the game, where it displays a huge one-way shield that allows it to shoot at enemies without risk of being shot back. As you can imagine, this is a really great ability, but here's the thing, it doesn't move. It forces Tone to stay in this one spot to be able to utilize it. If you were to flank or push this Tone, you could get around this problem. And again, this is something that goes for every single other defensive ability in the game. In some way or another, they're all flawed and therefore exploitable, like for example being slowed or not being able to shoot. Monarch, on the other hand, just shoots this little beam at you. If nothing else, just compare the downtime here. The only thing you can really try to do to make Monarch waste this is to make them miss, which is a pretty daunting task when you're a giant slow robot, which isn't even counting the fact that Monarch doesn't actually have to shoot you, or any of your allies, because Monarch can use this ability on NPCs. Oh yes, you heard me right. I did in fact build a 3-layer deep star-shaped trench in my front yard to deter unarmored land assault. Your move, chat. And also that Monarch doesn't even have to fight anybody to be able to heal. While everybody else is fighting over scraps after a Titan gets rodeoed, if a Titan gets rodeoed, Monarch can sit around in the backline picking its butt and healing off of random IMC conscripts. And if all of that wasn't enough, Monarch even has a unique passive trait that allows itself to exit the doomed state, which no other Titan can do by grabbing a battery. Even when you kill a Monarch, it may not truly be dead. Luckily, this is an optional part of the loadout, and most people don't run it, but unlike everybody else, they can. We've talked a lot so far about the different upgrades you get from Monarch's ultimate, and I want to stress that these upgrades aren't some bullshit. They're serious stuff, and a fully kitted Monarch is a vicious threat for any other Titan or pilot. Traditionally, the meta loadout focuses on amplifying the power of its already fucked up primary weapon, the XO16 chain gun, which is probably something we should discuss now before we get too far along. In Titanfall 2, in the pre-Monarch times, Titans had primary weapons with significant weaknesses or an Achilles heel you could exploit, much like every other part of them. Legion's minigun, for example, had 2 fire modes, and it was inefficient if you were in the wrong mode for the range that you're fighting at. Not to mention it has to spin up. Northstar's plasma railgun had to charge up to deal maximum damage and had a very low fire rate otherwise. Tone's 40mm cannon deals limited damage to Titans on its own because of other mechanics that Tone uses to get that damage difference back. But without those mechanics, it's a very mediocre weapon. And the same goes for everyone I didn't list. Basically everybody had something going on that was to their detriment, which a savvy opponent could use against you. This was especially important as a pilot because a pilot obviously is very flimsy compared to a Titan. Every Titan can dispatch a foolish pilot in a single shot. Titan weapons having situational downsides was integral to the survival of pilots who tried to take them down, and is part of what makes pilot versus Titan gameplay as fun as it is. A pilot knows they can maneuver around a Northstar's low fire rates, or catch a Legion out of position with their assault cannon undeployed, or outrange a Ronin or whatever, so on and so forth. And of course, this also reflects in the Titan versus Titan matchups. The XO16, however, doesn't really have a weakness. Veterans of this channel will remember the time when I tried to crowdfund everybody buying me a 2012 Honda Sport, and they'll also remember that this channel is no friendly territory to assault rifles, which happen to be my least favorite type of weapon in modern FPS games, which sucks, because of the most common design in modern FPS games. We're getting away from them little by little, but not very fast. And I dislike assault rifles in games for all the very reasons that make the XO16 a problem. It's too versatile, it's too easy to use, it's not particularly interesting, and they often come packaged with mechanics I dislike, which isn't really their fault, but it keeps being true, so I've got another video you can watch to learn more if you're interested, no pressure, but I find this kind of weapon to be boring. I prefer more committal and often slower firing weapons with more significant reloads, or weapons that are just bonkers, because I think that makes the game more fun and more skillful for both players. The attacker has a limited number of shots to hit, and their shots require commitment because they cycle to a new round slowly, and the defender has more opportunities to punish bad aim through movement or other mechanics. The XO16 is exactly not that, and it comes with added issues because of the fact that it's on Monarch. You may as well call this gun Zeus because it kills Titans. And it did have sex with its own family, but we're not talking about that today. The XO16 is an assault rifle through and through. It's amazing up close and out to medium range, while remaining very functional at longer ranges, especially because you can aim down sights in a weird way. It's automatic, so your missed shots more or less don't matter because you fire them really fast and because you get 40 of them. And it's always ready to go unless you're reloading. There's no spin-up period, no charging time, no bad angles or anything. You click, they take damage. Basically, if a Monarch can see you, it can shoot you, and this is a problem because damaging a Titan builds ultimate meter. Some of you can probably already see how the storm is brewing here. Monarch has a nearly 100% uptime machine gun that deals fantastic damage before the upgrades, which allows it to deal consistent damage to almost every Titan in every situation, which builds more ult meter for it to upgrade its 100% uptime high damage assault rifle into a 100% uptime can opener super gun. This allows Monarch to play incredibly passively, camping in some decent cover with decent sightlines to sling bullets across the map at whatever it can see to slowly build an upgrade. The availability of the XO16 also makes it so that Monarch doesn't have as much of a problem shooting at wayward NPCs as other Titans do, which passively cause it to build more ultimate meter. If you trade with a Monarch, it's winning because your Titan doesn't get better as the match progresses, and you get maybe one ultimate, while Monarch gets 2 or more. Even if you get that far, of course, because Monarch deals significant damage before any of this happens as well. The XO16 isn't some slouch before it gets upgraded, it's actually pretty good, meaning that Monarch is really good at playing keep away so that it can hoard upgrades like a dragon does gold or my aunt does parking tickets, while other Titans have to risk their necks to go and solve problems and get their rewards. Trying to push a Monarch and get aggressive with it can be a losing proposition in many cases as well, because Monarch retreats exceptionally. It's not the best runaway Titan. That goes to Northstar, who's really fast, has 3 dashes, and can literally shoot a little mine that locks other Titans into one position, but Northstar is mincemeat if you get close. And Monarch just isn't. It has about as much health as other Titans, and again, it's completely uninhibited by that primary weapon. So it's able to be very mobile, and all the while you're chasing it, it's shooting you with that fucked up chain gun. And again, same Titan that can heal itself on a dime, and stun you and burst you down with rockets, so anytime you try to take the fight to Monarch, they can hit a really hard U-turn and put you in a bad situation. And this is probably where we should bring up those very rockets. The rocket salvo in a vacuum isn't really the most powerful thing about Monarch by any means, they're just another thing that Monarch has. Rockets are a pretty vanilla damaging ability. It's everything outside of that vacuum that is a problem, though. To explain this tangent, though, we have to go on another tangent and talk about how good Monarch is versus pilots. Because Monarch is outrageously good at killing pilots. Remember, Titanfall is a very fast and mobile game, at least when you don't have some pedophile sitting on a roof with a Spitfire in your match, but pilots only really move the fastest when they're going forward or at a strafing angle. Moving up and down or doing hard pivots without certain techniques is a lot slower. So people can move very fast, but they do move kind of linearly. Monarch, and more specifically the XO16, is like tailor-built to hunt that kind of prey. It shoots fast, it shoots a lot, it's incredibly good for tracking, and you have a ton of bullets to shoot with, so anything you miss doesn't really matter. I really can't stress how many kill streaks the XO16 has just kind of handed me. It is truly abominable. Now, one of the weaknesses that Monarch could have had is that Monarch could have been bad against pilots who are tucked into tight corridors or hiding behind walls and windows. The XO16 is hit scan after all, so it can't like curve around corners or anything. This would make hiding from a Monarch pretty good, if not for the rocket pod. The rockets, as you can imagine, deal a little bit of blast damage, and while they aren't amazing at doing this, they are capable of flushing out pilots from hard-to-reach places. And this isn't a unique trait or anything, but it's just one of those things that Monarch could have been bad at, but just doesn't have to be. Against Titans, the rockets are also capable of some pretty significant burst damage, mostly because of one of Monarch's other abilities, which is Rearm and Reload, which allows it to reload all of its other cooldowns instantly. This means you can dump a rocket pod into somebody, rearm and reload, and then do it again. Or more accurately, you can mag dump somebody with the XO16, stun them, rocket pod them, rearm and reload, rocket pod them, and stun them again. Again, a lack of burst damage is something that could have been sort of a downside for Monarch. All of this probably sounds impossible to deal with if you're not too experienced with Titanfall. And I won't lie, it is kind of annoying, but let me take 1 second to specify that this Titan isn't exactly unbeatable. Every Titan in this game is capable of powerful stuff. Even Scorch can suicide for easy multi-kills against perfectly healthy opponents in seconds with the right situation. The key words here being the right situation and 4. The difference is that Monarch simply does all of this more or less all of the time. Every character in any game has peaks and valleys, right? The peaks are when your character is doing exactly what you want them to do. They're winning or they're making big plays using the specific strengths that only they have. And the valleys are obviously the opposite, fighting your worst matchup, being counterplayed well, or just being in bad situations. Every Titan in this game does have great peaks, but they can also have some pretty rough valleys. Monarch is just less explosive and inconsistent than everybody else. It's always just kind of good. If all the other Titans are this big sine wave where they either do really well or do really poorly, Monarch is just a much flatter graph whose average position is above the average, and kinda just keeps going up the more they survive. It doesn't really have any character-specific valleys, so to speak. And this isn't like hypothetical or theoretical stuff, this is just what Monarch is and what they do. The worst offense of all of this is how it combines to make a Titan that is just kind of annoying to fight. If you leave a Monarch alone, it can slowly farm NPCs, gameplay dependent, or long-range damage to be able to upgrade and eventually become a problem. If you go after it as a pilot, it might just be a death sentence. If you try to keep it at long range, it might be better at fighting you than your Titan is at fighting it. And of course, the Monarch player can just hide from you or leave. Trying to push the Monarch can be a problem because it has completely uninhibited movement, and it can effectively ink itself and expend all of its resources for a huge and punishing wave of damage, while also ending up being a lot sturdier than you might think. If you can pinch Monarch into a bad position, it goes down just like anything else, but Monarch doesn't have any Monarch-specific bad situations. All the times where Monarch is in a bad way, every other Titan would also be in a bad way. There's really nothing about Monarch that you can take advantage of, and the only way to really deal with it is to get led on a wild goose chase where you're taking damage the entire time you follow it. If you're doing this as a Scorch or a Legion, it's very possible that it will outpace you. If you're playing as Tone or Ion, then you can definitely keep up with it. Ion being pretty even, but Tone can seriously get out-damaged by a Monarch. You have to be careful to be able to keep up the race. A Northstar never wants to be chasing anybody, and Ronin has to go all in. The only time you have any advantage is when you're very close and you can use your sword. If the Monarch gets away from you, you're gonna get outranged. And even if you do stick to them, it's a very dangerous proposition because the combination of the XO16 and smoke does a lot of damage. There's just no real good strategy for dealing with a Monarch outside of very obvious things like outnumber them or use an ultimate. Again, I might be making this sound a lot worse than it really is. Monarch doesn't ruin the game or anything, it's just that Titanfall's Titan gameplay was so spectacular before they got here. These are some of the best, for lack of a better term, vehicles in a shooter I've ever played. It's not an annoying chore to deal with a Titan like it is in, again, Battlefield or something similar. It's exciting for both players, and a Titan can do a lot of damage to all the pilots on the enemy team, and all the pilots on the enemy team can do a lot of damage to a Titan. And of course, the Titans themselves were also really fun to play. It's again like a little hero shooter tucked away in this game. This is probably fucked up, but I have about as much fun playing Titans in this game as I did with the entire game of Overwatch. Maybe even more. Dealing with Titans can sometimes be a little bit annoying, especially if you're in like a bad mood or something, but what used to be what I would say is like, I don't know, 90% of the time exciting and frantic and interesting, and 10% of the time kind of a pain, went more to like an 80-20 ratio, just because dealing with Monarch isn't quite as fun as everybody else. It doesn't ruin your day or anything, it's just like, you know, you see that Monarch over there and you think, I do have to deal with that, but I just kind of wish maybe it wasn't Monarch. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is also the incredible versatility that Monarch has that, you guessed it, a Sycamore tree just doesn't have. Every Titan in the game has a couple of things they can equip as a part of your Titan loadout. Some of these perks are universal between all of the Titans, and some of them are specific to the one you're playing. Everyone who isn't Monarch gets 2 universal perks and 1 Titan-specific perk to change and customize. Monarch gets all of that and its 3 upgrades, each of which have 3 separate selections. Before even knowing what any of these do, the versatility is comparatively off the charts. You're unlikely to see anything outside of the meta loadout, which involves heavy investment into the XO16. Even so, the point remains that Monarch can change their build if needed to a greater degree than everybody else. Since you're still watching this video, I assume you're here for the long haul, or you fell asleep, in which case, ooh, you're going to start dreaming about a sheep. A big sheep with 3 rows of teeth that's chasing you. Ooh. But also, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if we went over all of these different upgrades. We're going to start off with the ones that you're very unlikely to see, and then move into and focus more on the meta loadout, which is the one that you're most likely to play against. For the first layer of upgrades, we start off with energy transfer, which allows Monarch to give his allies shield by shooting them with his stun ray. That is correct. If it wasn't enough that Monarch can heal itself, it can now do so for its allies. Missile rounds gives the Monarch more shots on its rocket salvos, providing greater burst damage. You're unlikely to see this because Monarch can't fire rockets and the XO16 at the same time, but again, it's there if you want it. For layer 2, we have Maelstrom, which makes it so that the Monarch's anti-rodeo countermeasure, Electric Smoke, deals even more damage, though this isn't really for killing pilots, it's more so for punishing close-range Titan threats like the Ronin, and in my opinion, actually has some viability if you have like a lot of Ronin and Scorches on the enemy team who are too stubborn to swap. Energy Field makes it so that the stun ray now has blast damage and hits everything in an AoE, in case you were missing just too much or needed to stun multiple targets at once, or wanted to use this against pilots who are tucked away somewhere. Now you can. For the final layer, we have the multi-target hunting system, which allows the Monarch to lock onto enemies by holding out the missile salvo before firing. Again, not really something you're going to take because it decreases your DPS because you're holding out the rockets instead of shooting the XO16. And finally, we have Superior Chassis. This upgrade does have some fans, but I think those people are kind of wrong not to be like a jerk, and it simply increases your Titan's health and removes your weak spots, so small arms fire is basically useless against you. This would be phenomenal in an earlier upgrade spot, but by the time you get to level 3, you're probably already pretty heavily damaged anyway, and even if you're not, the level 3 upgrade you want to use is just too crazy to pass up. That being said, the reason this has any fans is because the numbers on it are quite strong. You get a lot of health. But let's talk about the loadout you're actually going to use and see. For our first upgrade, we take arc rounds, because it improves our already outrageous main gun by making it so that it deals more damage to shields and defensive objects, and gives you a higher magazine capacity, so more shooting that XO16 we love. Secondly, we take rearm and reload, which increases the speed of our refresh ability, so we can do those crazy combos more often, and it increases the reload speed on our XO16. And finally, we take accelerator, because it increases the XO16's base damage and makes it so that the weapon fires progressively faster the longer you fire continuously. This final ability, no joke, is actually fucked up and makes the DPS on the XO16 eye-watering. This will pop open Titans like a bag of chips, doing anywhere from 30 to 50% of their health in one big attack, before you add on the rockets and the stuns and so on. Remember, we combine this with a magazine capacity upgrade, so more bullets to fire faster with accelerator, and a reload speed upgrade to reload faster after dumping with accelerator to get back to spewing lead with accelerator. This ability right here is what makes level 3 Monarch a monster. If Monarch can get to accelerator with even a decent amount of health left, you might as well just kiss winning a 1v1 against it goodbye. It just does so much damage to the point where it honestly might be better at that point to try to take it on as a pilot, because at least then you can chip away at it and not give it the opportunity to rip half of a Titan away from you in an instant. And that brings up another funny thing about Monarch, in that Monarch is the only Titan whose ultimate almost can't be wasted. Every other Titan's ultimate can be used in some way where it isn't effective or you don't get that much out of it. Tone's core allows you to shoot a ton of rockets, and those rockets can be dispersed or blocked by defensive abilities. Legion's core gives you auto-aim for a little while, and you can use that in a situation where there's not a lot of great targets. The only way to completely waste Monarch's ultimate is if you already have all your upgrades and you have full shield. And frankly, if you're winning that hard, it almost doesn't even matter. And I think that's a funny thing to punctuate. It's like no matter how far deep you dig into this character, it just doesn't have the same problems as everybody else, which is pretty much a perfect allegory for the whole Titan. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say. Thank you to my channel members and patrons, Kant Guy, Iwajira, Lieutenant Knightley, PP Me Peanuts 2112, Jason 2699, Ryan, Marshy Mella, Chinese Mike, and the most important patron of all, Kublai Khan.